Hey students, Coach Mohika here. Today or this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about domain and range. You're going to have a few assignments related to domain and range. So right now what I'm going to go ahead and do is talk to you a little bit about domain and range so we know what they actually mean. Right off the bat, I want you to go ahead and get into your head that domain is always going to be X and range is always going to be Y. So as long as you know those quick little tips, you'll always know that you're looking for an X value for domain and you're looking for a Y value for range. So let's go ahead and look at some problems. So on this one, if I first off am looking for my domain values, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to say, okay, so my domain values, Coach Mohika already told me that my domain is going to be my X values. So for each one of these dots, I'm paying attention to the X values. So I have an X value here, I have an X value here, the X value here, and here. So all I need to do is determine what those values are. So this first one, if I count from the starting point, so I have 0 right here. So I have 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So I'm going to have a -5. At this one, it was going to be a -2. If I go in the reverse side, +1. This side over here, 2, 3, 4, +4. So there are my domain values, and those domain values are all going to be written as X values. Okay, so simple enough. So now let's go ahead and look at range. So if I'm looking at range now, my range is then going to be my Y values. So I'm going to look at each one of these points and determine where they cross the Y axis. So just drawing some quick little lines right here so you can see exactly where they cross the Y axis. Notice how I'm putting a line at each point. So if I look at this first one, this first line is going to cross at -1. This second line is crossing at 0. This next one, 1, 2, is crossing at 2. And that last one is crossing at 3. So right there are all of my range values. Range values are going to be Y answers. So when you're doing your quizzes today, just look at it and you'll see Y values must be all of my range. All right, let's go to another example. Okay, so if I'm looking at this one, it's going to be a little bit different because this one's going to have a little bit more information. It's going to have a bigger kind of graph. It's going to have a different range of things. So if I'm looking at my domain first off, I already told you your domain was going to be your X values. So I'm going to put a box around this at my X values. If you notice, the image doesn't go across these lines at all. So let's look at these X values and see what they are. Right here I'm at 0, so then this is going to be a +1. Here it's at my 0 once again, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to be at a -4 since I'm going to the left. So that means that my domain is going to be a variation from -4 less than or equal to X, because we're talking about the X values, and the greatest that it's going to be is at 1. So our domain will look just like this. -4 is less than or equal to X, which is less than or equal to 1. So notice how this number coincides with the furthest left. This number coincides with the furthest right. And then the letter X goes in the middle because that's going to be our domain. Remember, domain is always going to be our X value. Okay, so let's do the same thing for our range. Okay, so if I'm looking at our range, range is going to be my Y values. So once again, I'm going to put a box around this graph at my Y values. I'm going to count to see what they are. This one is going to be at a -2. This one up here, 1, 2, 3, at a +3. So if you remember, I told you that your range was always going to be those Y values. So I'm going to set this up the same way. I'm going to have a Y in the middle, less than or equal to, and then that lower number, this one right here, that -2 is going to come right over here. And then on the other side, I'm going to have that +3. So notice how it's going to be all of the values within -2 to 3. All right, let's go ahead and get another example in. Okay, so looking at this one, if you notice, the big difference here is that we have this arrow right there. So that arrow actually makes a significant difference for us in how we view this graph. Okay, so I'm going to look at this arrow and I'm going to determine what I'm going to have as my domain. Remember our domain, x value, looking at x values. So I'm gonna look right here. As you can see, this is at 0. But here's the thing, everything gets greater than 0. So we can have this written as a couple of different ways. So this is going to be all the x values greater than or equal to 0. Or if I reverse this, 0 is less than or equal to all of the x values. Because these x values are just going to keep going on and on and on and on forever. Okay, so now that we got that one out of the way, let's go ahead and look at our range. Range will work a little bit differently because I'm looking at my y values. So I'm putting a line right here. As you can see, that line is at the number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put a number 1 up here. Okay, if I look at this arrow is now going down. It's nothing up here is going to be included. So everything below 1 is going to be included. So that means 1 is going to be my highest value. So I have a couple of ways of writing this. 1 is greater than or equal to all the y values, or y is less than or equal to 1. Okay? Because notice everything is going to be below that 1 value. So we have everything going down. Your biggest thing on your quizzes today is you can omit a couple of answers just by looking at this y value. As long as you know that range pertains to y, you will be just fine. Okay, I have one more example for y'all today. Okay, so we have a parabola. The benefit that you get in a parabola, whenever we're looking for our domain or our x values, this one right here, make it really easy because our domain for these is always the exact same thing. So I'm just going to write D for domain. It's always going to be ARN, which ARN stands for all real numbers. So every single time you have a domain with this image, you are looking at all real numbers. Okay, now that we've established that, let's go ahead and do range. So my range, if you remember, it's going to be all of our y values. So let's go to the very top of this graph. I'm looking at this y value right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to be at 4. Since this is a downward facing graph, that means all the y values are going to be less than or equal to 4. Okay? Hopefully you can get through this assignment pretty easily. If you have any questions, you can always contact me via text message, phone call, or email. Good luck and hope to have some assignments turned in today. Have a great day, guys.